hopefully you're all seeing thermal imaging camera photograph of the inside of a church. So I'm presenting this work, but I did want to absolutely begin by repeating what it says at the top, that all of the credit for the analysis I'm going to show you goes to Sarah Jeffrey, who I think is on the conference today, but will probably hate me to draw attention to her. She's a master's student who has been doing this analysis of energy audits for us. And she has also now joined the team, the environmental team at the Diocese of Bath and Wales, which is really great news. So this analysis is just reported to both the Church Buildings Council and to the National Environmental Working Group. And I'm planning, after the conference is finished and I've had a chance to draw a breath, to circulate both the slides and the report so that everyone can have access to the findings. First, what I'm going to show you is just a little bit of information back from our 2012 baseline report, so that you can remember what we where we started from. And then the real value of the energy audit analysis is showing us what action we need to take. So back in 2012, we had the baseline study done, and it showed us just how significant the carbon footprint of the Church of England was. Total annual carbon footprint between 600,000 and 1 million tonnes of CO2e. And that analysis was only looking at energy use, not at transport or materials, procurement, food waste, just on the energy. So it gives you a sense that that's a very material carbon footprint for our organisation across our churches, our cathedrals, our schools, our offices. It showed us this analysis, which I use everywhere I go, so you've probably all seen it before, the total carbon emissions by building type back in that 2012 baseline study, showing us that just over half coming from our schools, where we've got the heating and the lighting on for the majority of the week. And then around 2/5 from our churches, particularly the ones with the larger meters squared over here in this slice. And then clergy houses, cathedrals, and offices. And that it really, really varies across building type. So each of our different types of building, what was our average carbon footprint back when this analysis was done in 2012, showing us that Church House Westminster at that time as our biggest single office. It would look very different at the moment with no staff coming in. Church House Westminster at that time being our biggest single office with our biggest single footprint, then our large cathedrals and our secondary schools, and then our other buildings, giving us a really good sense of where we need to begin prioritising our efforts on those key buildings, secondary schools, our cathedrals, and then our primary schools, our larger churches and our offices. The energy audit process then. So what we have been doing is for a considerable period of time, there have been diocesan energy audit programs going on. And then more recently, the National Energy Audit Programme being run through Parish Buying. And over that time, a lot of individual church audits have been done, which have helped the individual churches. But this analysis I'm presenting you to you today is the first time that we've gathered a lot of those audits together and inputted all of the data about the recommendations for the individual churches and looked at what can we learn when we look across the piece, and therefore where can we focus our support more effectively. The analysis was jointly commissioned by the Diocese of Oxford, the Diocese of Leeds and ourselves nationally. And we drew on the audit programmes from Oxford Diocese, from Leeds Diocese, and the national ones from Parish Buying. 181 church and church hall energy audit reports were analysed, and they've shown us what are the most frequent recommendations, what are the most cost-effective recommendations to enable us to support our churches in taking action. One caveat I do want to put at the beginning is that churches opt in to the energy audit process, and therefore it is a slightly self-selecting group, because a church that chooses to have an energy audit might well be one with a larger energy use or with a particularly complicated problem that they're trying to deal with. So we have to think this is a self-selecting sample of churches that we're looking at that have had an energy audit, but still, what can we learn from what we can read in those reports? So the first thing is just how widely energy use varies from church to church, with each of these columns being an individual church. The orange is the gas or oil, the blue is the electric, and the green line being the average. And we can see that this is very, very long tail of low energy using churches, which need very little intervention in order to have a very low carbon footprint. And then up on the right-hand side of the graph are medium to high energy using churches. And it's clear just looking at this that they will need different kinds of intervention to approach being a net zero church. There's a lot of detail in the report about the carbon footprint of different categories of church. I'm just showing you a couple of examples here. When we share the full report after the conference, you'll be able to go through the graphs and the tables and look at it in more detail, but I think it's just useful. So in this example, this is the sample of the medium-sized churches, so from 250 to 650 meters squared. This graph on the left shows you the hours of use and the carbon footprint in terms of TCO2, tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And you can see how much it varies, but also that this is a pretty strong trend line that as the church is used more, the carbon footprint will go up, as we would expect. You probably know from the energy footprint tool that we have two measures of energy efficiency in there. One is the carbon footprint per meter squared, and then the other, really importantly, is the carbon footprint per hour of usage, because we know that some of our most successful churches who are doing activities all throughout the week will therefore have a higher carbon footprint. So it's really useful that the energy footprint tool lets them look at whether they're doing a really good job per hour of usage. And this right-hand graph is again for our medium churches, looking at the size by the carbon footprint. And again, you can see how much it varies from church to church to church. You can get a pretty strong sense that if a church is above around 20 tons of CO2 per year, these would be our priority for a proactive support. And you can also see the different fuel types. So the churches are asked what their primary heating fuel is. And the electric ones are here marked in grey, the gas in orange, the oil in blue. And whilst it's a relatively small sample size, so we need to use a little bit of care, the results suggest that for our churches using electricity as their main heating fuel, they have a lower carbon footprint. And that is what we would expect, a lower carbon footprint than oil and for most of the gas churches. The average footprint of the electrically heated medium churches in this sample is 4.7 tons of CO2 per year. For gas, it's 16, and for oil, 17.5. The energy audits confirm something that we know intuitively, which is that heating makes up the majority of church energy use. So this sample of 126 churches and halls, 84% of the energy use is going on heating the church. So again, when we're thinking, where do our priorities need to be if we have any spare resource, trying to support our churches in tackling heat loss, in making their existing heating systems more efficient, and in moving away and decarbonising their heat and tackling this 84% is really where to be focusing our time and energy. And they also show us what, again, we intuitively know, which is that decarbonising heat is a massive challenge, with nearly 90% of our churches using fossil fuel as their primary source of heating, gas, oil, and LPG. So what do we do about it? So the energy audits are showing us what are the most commonly identified areas of action. So looking across those 181 energy audits, we can see that the first that comes up most often is switching to 100% renewable electricity. And the second is tackling the lighting. Even though lighting is a relatively small slice on that earlier pie chart, it's relatively quick and cost effective to tackle. So it comes up in a lot of the energy reports. After that, it's really about tackling heating. So as we would expect, many of the actions, many of these most high frequency actions concern heat loss, so draft proofing, tackling the windows. Here, I should be very clear, they're not recommending double or secondary glazing the main church windows. That I don't think that's ever come up. It's more looking at specific office windows, vestry windows, hall windows, or tackling heat loss through different forms of insulation. And then the other very high frequency of being recommended is actions on the heating systems. And sometimes those are actions around optimizing the existing heating system with better controls, by trying to get the existing heating system to last as long as possible through things like sludge filters, by altering the background heating hours or the temperatures. And sometimes it's about replacing the heating system, either with, say, pew heating or an air source heat pump, or in some cases, replacing an old boiler with a new gas boiler. It's important to say that behavioural changes are absolutely on there, and behavioural changes are so important in all of this. I think they probably come through in the energy audit process a little bit less than they should, because the people doing the audits are more likely to be looking for these kind of technological solutions. But behavioural changes are absolutely key. Looking then at of the multitude of recommendations coming from the auditors, not all of them, but many of them are then quantified. And then this table is looking at, for the quantified actions that are recommended by the energy auditors, which come out as being what we're going to call here quick wins. So these are ones where you get the highest impact per pound invested. And these are the 10 that come out as those quick wins. Reducing the background heating temperature or hours. You can see here what the auditors are saying it would cost to do this. In this case, we're just changing the settings, so the expected installation cost is 0, and then the kilowatt hours saved per pound of the installation cost. Switching to renewables, purchasing data loggers and using those to enable the church to optimize its heating schedule, putting flow regulators on the taps, a product called endotherm, although more research is needed on this really, but it does come out a lot in the audits, but just a little bit of care that I think more research is needed on endotherm. Insulating pipes, swapping specific heaters to infrared panels, electric point of use water heaters on timers, or either installing electric point of use water heaters or putting a timer on the existing ones, using thermostatic radio valves and save watt devices or similar things that make your appliances more energy efficient. These 10 come out as these kind of quick wins where you get a good impact per pound invested. And then these 10 are what we're calling the big wins. So they have the highest percentage impact on energy consumption. So for each of these things here, you can see the number here on the blue line is the percentage of the church's carbon footprint that the energy auditor thinks could be reduced by undertaking this action. And then the orange bar is how much they think it would cost to implement, although with some important caveats around those costs. So they exclude professional fees, they exclude scaffolding, and also what the energy auditor thinks in this specific church it would cost to do it. It doesn't necessarily mean it would be true in every church, because if the auditor doesn't think it's a sensible thing to do in that church, they won't have recommended it. I hope that explained that well enough. What I mean is, for those churches where this is recommended, this is how much the auditors think it would cost to do. And what does it tell us? It tells us that it's first useful to notice that 4 of the things are on both lists. So setting the background heating, optimizing the hours and the temperature of the background heating is on both lists. So is the electric point of use water heaters, endotherm, and data loggers and optimizing heating. So those are both relatively cost effective per pound and very impactful. And then we see that 7 of the big wins concern heating. Also, it's worth seeing that some of them overlap. So in some energy audit reports, the auditor says switch away from gas. In others, they recommend a specific solution, such as under pew heating or air source heat pumps. So these categories do blur and overlap a little bit. But 7 of those big wins concern heating, switching away from gas, under pew heating, air source heat pump, stopping or reducing the hours of the background heating, replacing a boiler, endotherm, and the data loggers. The only thing that doesn't come up on either of those previous slides that's here is solar PV, and that has been recommended on quite a number of churches by the energy auditors as a way of generating clean electricity, quite often combining that with a heat pump so that you can get your zero carbon heating by having clean electricity running a heat pump. We've been using this analysis already, so I based a lot of what you've seen in the Practical Path to Net Zero guidance on Sarah's early results. It's helped us develop our brief for this year's energy audit programme, where we've slightly changed the brief based on what we've learned from the first year. It's informing early discussions at this stage with Parish Buying about whether we could do national procurement for any of the more common items. And we know that what we need to go on to do next is to get guidance out, helping churches implement those quick wins and those big wins. We know that what churches need is reliable information about suppliers, about funding sources, and about how to do the things that are coming out in this report. I'm not going to spend time on it today because I think most of the people that joined this conference have attended one of my webinars on the Practical Path to Net Zero, but the analysis has really helped us break down the steps, the actions which are for those low energy using churches on the left-hand side of the graph at the beginning. Where do we start? Things like maintaining the roof, maintaining the gutters, dealing with the broken windows, the what next actions, which makes sense if you're a medium energy using church, the bigger things like solar panels that are on the high energy using churches, and then the only if actions in particular circumstances. So this year's energy audit programme, and if you don't have your own diocesan audit programme, and I know that some dioceses do, then please do encourage your churches to consider an audit through Parish Buying. It's open for applications now, and that closes at the end of September. I don't know yet whether that will be extended, so at the moment let me say the end of September. I think it's possible it might be extended, but let me stick with the line, which is it's open now and it closes at the end of September. 200 of the audits are going to be centrally subsidised, down from £445 plus VAT to £245 plus VAT. And to be eligible for that £200 subsidy, the church has to meet one of 6 criteria. And we've designed these to try and aim the audits at the churches who we think will gain the most from having an audit done. So that's either qualifying by energy use, if they're a high energy using church, by floor area, if they're a particularly large church, by their fuel, if they're currently on oil, qualifying by urgency. So this means if they've already got a report, such as a QI inspection, showing them that a major component of their existing heat system has less than 2 years of operating life left in it. Qualifying by commitment, that the PCC has passed a motion committing them to work toward net zero by 2030. Or finally, qualifying by intent, which is if they're already planning a substantive project which the energy audit could help inform. So when the church goes online to register their interest, they're asked to tick these boxes. It's taken absolutely on trust, but they tick one of these boxes to say whether they're eligible for one of the 6 criteria to get a subsidised audit. And to do that, they need to go onto the Parish Buying website, parishbuying.org.uk, and find the energy section and register themselves for an energy audit. Key messages to take from this: for most of those churches on the left-hand side of that energy graph, for our low energy churches, simple changes are all that's needed. Much can be done at relatively little cost, focusing on the quick wins and on the basic maintenance. And then as a diocese, if you have any available resource that you can use to support churches on this journey, focusing it proactively on those high energy using churches, and especially on trying to tackle heating. And the energy audit process, we know, really helps churches identify their way forward, especially when they're ready to make change. Thank you very much.